you share with us in our webinar. Some of you I know have been in the other webinars that we've had before, and some of you might be doing this for the first time. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's a very wet morning for us here in Jamaica. I don't know about what is happening outside of Jamaica, because I know that sometimes we have participants from outside of Jamaica. It's very wet this morning, and we are going to have to win it as presenters because our moderator wasn't able to make it in this morning. So please understand if you see that we have a few glitches. Anyway, it's our pleasure to be doing this webinar on ADHD and learning disabilities. I'm sorry, it's on particularly dyslexia. This is actually Dyslexia Month, and it is also ADHD Month. So you can understand that when we are trying now to do some kind of awareness this morning, it is going to be tight because both those subjects could fill a whole webinar and more. So the presentation this morning is really for us to understand a little bit more about how these two types of diagnoses might be affected by online learning. And hopefully some of the questions that you have, we might be able to answer those for you. We see already that there are people who are posting questions, and what we are going to do is after each presentation, we will give 10 minutes for question and answer. Okay, so we will answer the questions at that time. With me today is Mrs. Kellie-Anne Brown Campbell, and she is a school psychologist and very much a member, what should I call you, a McCam old girl in many ways, but she's just come back to join us at McCam because she was here after university working, and then she went away to study, came back, she came back to McCam, and then she went off again to work in different environments, including schools and in her private practice, but she could not leave McCam alone. So she's here with us again at McCam as our school psychologist. She really has a love for children overall. And so, you know, a lot of what she's doing is focused on younger children, but, you know, she works with older children as well. And she really also enjoys working with children with learning disabilities and also with developmental disabilities, especially those on the autism spectrum. So you will hear from her, and she likes to coach teachers as well. So teachers, listen for that. You know, you can probably call her up. Anyway, this morning I am going to be talking about ADHD, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, and what the implications might be for distance learning. So let's get going. I told you we are trying. Okay. All right. Next slide, please. Yes. All right. So when we talk about children with ADHD, we're really talking about a group of children that get a lot of attention. And we also know that there are lots of children who are considered ADHD who are not ADHD. So hopefully this morning we can clarify some of that. But the fact of the matter is that learning online during this COVID-19 pandemic is really a struggle for a lot of children. Very few children do like it. I've heard of one child who said he didn't want to go back to school. He liked it as it is. But most children are having a struggle with this online learning for different reasons. And I think in previous webinars, we tried to address some of those things. The children who require support services, you know, individualized attention, close monitoring in school, I think these children are particularly at a significant disadvantage. And we are talking here about the child with ADHD for sure. Some parents are just realizing, I think, just how much support the children do need in the learning environment now that they have been at home with them. And I am telling you that we've had more parents calling for assessments of their children now that they've been at home with them and understanding what's going on more with their learning in that kind of structured environment. All right, so what are some of the realities? We are talking about long hours online. We are talking about routines that are disrupted because being at home, the routine is quite different from the routine that would be at school. We are talking about children getting lost because of the multiple visual distractions that being online creates. We are also talking about reduced opportunities for physical exercise, and that's a big thing. Trying to get the children out of the house, trying to get them up and moving, getting some sunlight, which is very important for them as well. They are used to at school going out at playtime, having a rambunctious time with their friends, playing and so on. And so this is out of the picture now. Poor nutrition is one of the realities, I think, too, because the children at home are able to do a lot more snacking. And so parents are going to have to pay a lot more attention to, you know, how the children are eating and what they are eating. Okay, what are we talking about when we say a child has ADHD? Well, and as I said before, we're not going a lot into this whole thing of describing ADHD, but giving you enough. So it's a neurodevelopmental disorder, and it really is about irregular functioning that is happening within the brain. Neurodevelopmental would tell you, obviously, that it's in the brain, and the developmental is that it is across a lifespan that this thing is happening to people. It results in specific patterns of behavior. And this is why, you know, if you see a child behaving in a particular way, people say, I bet he is ADHD. And a lot of times it's not necessarily so. So the DSM-5 describes 3 subtypes. We have the type that is predominantly hyperactive and impulsive. We're talking about also the type that is predominantly inattentive, and then we're talking about a combined subtype. The DSM-5 actually also talks about functional impairments in activities of daily living. And really what that means is that it interferes with the quality of how the child is functioning on a day-to-day basis. They have to be reminded to do a lot of things that children would naturally do. As somebody said this morning, even brushing their teeth, you know, how the routines are not so easy for them. And because of that, there is a functional impairment that is going on in their activities of daily living. The DSM is actually the diagnostic manual that is used to determine the criteria to determine a diagnosis. What I would like to say too is that it's usual for us to also look for oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder when we are looking at, you know, a diagnosis for ADHD, because somehow those 2 diagnoses tend to go together. These other diagnoses tend to be linked with ADHD, but they obviously can stand on their own. In addition to that, we are also seeing with children with this diagnosis that they are actually at a risk more for depression and anxiety. And I think as we go forward and as we talk about it, you will see why. Because, you know, they are misunderstood a lot and they're anxious about outcomes in a way that some of us don't understand. But because they don't get it right, all the time, and they're always being picked on, and people are telling them how disappointed they are with them, then after time their whole self-image can take a beating. All right. Now we are going to pause a little bit.
Yes.
Because there is a poll.
There is a poll that we are going to put out for you to answer for us. So we'll give you a couple of seconds to answer this poll. Do you believe that children with ADHD can benefit from online learning platforms? Great. So we're seeing quite a few responses coming in. Most persons are saying yes at this point.
Very interesting.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I think most persons have been able to vote no. So we actually see that about 76% of persons have actually said yes, that they do believe that children with ADHD can benefit from online learning platforms. And of course, we'll go a little bit more into that as we go on. Thank you so much for responding. Just a little quick housekeeping as well. We'll have a couple more polls throughout the rest of the presentation. And at the very end, we'll ask that you not log out immediately. There will be a final survey that we're asking you to complete at the very end of the entire presentation. Okay? All right. So we may continue towards the camera.
Okay. You're my manager now, so move on to the next one.
Yes.
All right. Okay, so basically this is showing some of the symptoms that you're likely to see in children or adults, because I want you to note here that there are adults in this picture. And as I said before, the neurodevelopmental shows that it's really across a lifetime, because you don't suddenly not have ADHD. Presentation might change over time, but you have the diagnosis going on. Okay, so we are talking also about the fact that you can have comorbidities, so other diagnoses that are to me, I would probably say they are the main diagnosis, but you can have another ADHD as a part of that. And I want to point out in this that a lot of times people hone in on the ADHD, especially for the intellectual disability. I've come across that quite a lot, where people have a child with an intellectual disability who gives a lot of, have a lot of issues to do with their behaviors, and they think, okay, they had a diagnosis of ADHD and they think that that's the main diagnosis. But a lot of times children with ADHD are really very, average and above average in their intelligence. So, okay, but just to mention too that in some of the developed countries, the children are screened for certain medical conditions before a decision is made that they are ADHD, right? Iron deficiency being one of them, yes. And I had said before that the presentation changes over the years, but it goes on into adulthood. Thank you. Okay, so here we are saying that we have to look at some of the situations that we see with ADHD. And one of the things that I came across was that there are some persons who are saying ADHD is not really a disorder. It is, in fact, not that they want to take away from the medical side of things, the pathology as they call it, and they are trying to say, no, this child doesn't have a deficit. What they have is too much of everything. So it's how they inhibit and how they manage their behaviors that's the problem. But it's not that they have a disorder as such. This is what some of the arguments are going on. All right, so just looking at the characteristics very quickly, the symptoms. and I am saying here that usually in the structured learning environment, it is seen, these behaviors are seen, and are a lot more so when they're online. You're likely to see it a lot more when they're online. So the child who is hyperactive always is on the move. A lot of out of seat behaviors you will hear the teachers complaining about. They do a lot of fidgeting, they're easily distracted, they're hyper attentive, so they are attentive to what they're not supposed to attend to. Everything is going on in their head at the same time. They're attending to too many things at the same time. The impulsive child typically acts without thinking. So I've said here, so for example, they may touch a key on the keypad and get locked out of class or something. But their main thing for the impulsive child is that they have a problem with self-regulation. They have a problem with inhibiting themselves, their impulse to do something. They are interruptive, so they will get into conversations. Like if the students are talking to the teacher, they're butting in. And a lot of times there is a lack of awareness of how their actions are impacting on other people. The inattentive child, oh dear, this child is a lot of times not even picked up in the classroom as being there and having a problem, but they are inattentive, they daydream a lot, they have gaps in what they hear, and so they can't even fill in the gaps afterwards. So they miss out a lot on what is important that is going on in the classroom. So we have to look out for that group. What was the assignment? Which page did the teacher say I was to turn to? These are these children who are having that. So I'm saying here, all ADHD subtypes are likely to be off task for online teaching for different reasons. Yeah. Okay, but as I said before, they are creative thinkers, but they do not focus for long without stimulation. And here I put not just medication, because some of the children have to be on medication to keep them really, involved, and that brain ticking how it is supposed to, keep them alert. I'm not seeing, so that they have short attention span, and what we have to remember with them is that their short memory, they will remember in color. And what I mean by that is that you have to present materials to them in a way that catches their imagination. And so they will hold on to the information. But especially the child with the inattentive subtype, they miss out a lot, as I said. Funny enough, the children who are hyperactive, you will hear that they don't look like they're paying attention, but they heard everything that was being said, and then they can get on with it, without a problem. So there's a lot of reasons why I think they would do well online, and I know the majority of you had said that. So here are some things I know is that online, there's a lot more stimulation going on. There's the use of videos, music, movement. The child can kind of more or less work at his own pace, but hopefully keeping up. And they if they are given the information or the motivation to go and create and investigate and explore, there's a lot more freedom, I think, for them to do that online than in this classroom setting. But at the same time, we can see that when they are online, there are some things like recently I saw where the voices were distorted, so the child was not hearing properly. They were having a problem following at the pace, because again, if the instructions are not clear, they've lost out. And the inattentive child here would have lost out sometimes too. And there is a poor connectivity, things like that does have an impact. Some of the positive and negatives again, there is less confinement at home. The child can get up and move about without causing disturbance to other children, which is what is happening sometimes in the classroom. What I'm saying here that the challenge really is that supervision must happen. Yeah. Because it is easier for the child to leave the room if the parent is not there seeing what the child is doing. The child could be on the floor, the child could be outside of the room. So routines also have to be enforced. And I'm suggesting that timetables are posted where they can sit and go to the point of even saying that they should probably have a timer that will ring, go off when they are finishing or they have certain amount of time left for them to do their work and so on. So you can use some things in place, some things in place so that they can keep focus and keep working. And of course, I'm saying again that they can disregard the schedules, temptation to do other things, right? Very much there. So they can, a child I know recently had her cell phone under the desk while she was going on in class. Those are because the ADHD child wants to be doing so many things at the same time. This really is one of the challenges. So the teacher must keep the child in focus, keep calling from now and then, not to pick on the child. There's a difference there. So she's prompting not just that child, but other children as well. And of course, as parents, where I'm saying parents, you have to monitor. It's about monitoring. Yes. Okay. Okay, build expectations. Yeah. So if they're at home and they are told, look, tomorrow we're going to look at a video. You need to find information. They're going to be able to at home, use whatever they have there in their environment to seek out the information that they need. But the main thing I want to say here is that, like, the child with ADHD should be paired with another child, maybe, because there is a way in which this child needs to know that they belong to a group still. They're a part of what is going on within their classroom group, and that he has a responsibility to the group, to the other members of the group. So it would be good for that child to work alongside another child, and keep that going. And I'm saying too, for them, connectivity is very important. Parents of children with ADHD know that a lot of times these children are left out. They are left out of the birthday parties. They are made to feel that they are a nuisance and that kind of thing. So we have to keep the connection going for them. Plan play dates or, just talking, virtual play dates, just, whatever you can do to just keep them connected with their group of children. Okay, another challenge, child with ADHD often lacks good organizational skills. And at home, they are going to think, I am at home and I'm in a relaxed environment. So we really need to make sure that they are very organized at home and they know that they are in learning in school at home. Right? So you have to really plan for that. I want to just emphasize this because I know that some research was done some years ago, and they found that at the University of the West Indies, where there was a dropout of students, they were looking at the students who were dropping out, and a good number of them were students with ADHD. And what the problem was, so since they were just not keeping up. They were not going to classes on time. They were not handing in assignments on time. So they have the potential to succeed. Very much so. Other issues. But the other issues are making a problem for them. So please, while they're at home, make sure that they keep organized and have things in place, a place for everything, as I've said there. And these are just some ideas of what they can do to help with the organization. Time management. Okay, then. That is a part of the organization, obviously. But I know that some parents have had problems with just getting their children up and going and organized for the day, right? They just getting ready for school is a big problem for them. out of the bed. I know that I get from parents. I leave them and I tell them, get dressed.
Yeah.
Half an hour later, they're still in the middle of
Mhm.
doing what they're not supposed to be doing. So these are children that you really have to make sure that they are on time with, doing what they have to do, certain amount of time for getting ready, and there are consequences if they don't. And the important thing is here that there's no travel time
Yes.
to get to school. So they have a little bit more time, at their
Mhm.
disposal. So they need to have that time organized though, so that, they don't get too relaxed.
Yes.
All right. And I think at the end there, I said the hyperactive child or the child with hyperactivity, which
Mhm.
is what we should say, doesn't calm down so easily,
Right.
by the end of the day. So you have to know how to take them down a notch.
Wind them down.
Yeah.
Yes.
Before the end of the day. All right. Um, Behavior intervention. Okay, then if you have to deal with a child with ADHD, you know that behavior intervention is extremely important.
Mhm.
And so for the younger children here, I'm talking about rewards, having reward charts and stickers, and even getting, contracts in place with the older,
Yes.
younger ones.
Yes. Yes.
And for the even older ones, and here you're talking about even going into high school,
Mhm.
things like this strategy where we refer to it as checking in and checking out. So at the beginning of the day, the teacher and the parent must do this exercise with the child. What is the expectation for today?
Mhm.
What are the behaviors we are going to, you know, um, attend to?
Mhm.
So sometimes it's just two things: keeping on
Yes.
task,
The less, the better.
yeah, completing an assignment,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. So you work on one, then you go to the next, and so. But at the beginning of the day, you do that. You set the goal. At the end of the day, did you accomplish that? The parent should be able to see that. The child should be able to see
Right.
that. The teacher should be able to see that.
Mhm.
Okay. Cognitive behavior therapy, of course, this is a big thing that we use in psychology too. That really talks about getting that child to think
Mhm.
about what it is that they are doing and what are the consequences. For themselves, they can think about what are the triggers for my behavior.
Mhm.
As they are getting older, this is much more easy for them to do than the younger child, obviously. But what is triggering this thing? Why did I do what I did? And what are the likely consequences for my behavior? What should they be? And please follow through with
Yes.
consequences once you have set them up with your child. So the
Consistency.
worst thing you can do is to say, this will happen if you do or if you don't do,
Mhm.
and then you don't do it.
Yeah.
They won't pay any attention to what you're saying in the future. And I just added here a feelings chart. I just think this is important for the child with ADHD because there's here I refer to it as extreme emotional sensitivity. I actually
Yes.
saw that somewhere written, and I
Mhm.
thought, yeah, this is really true. The
They struggle with
children
regulating their
are
emotions.
really,
Mhm.
they have a lot of emotional stuff going on with them. And as I said before, some of them end up being anxious and depressed
Mhm.
and so on because of how they are responded to and
Yeah.
how people view their behaviors. Because a lot of people just
Their
think it's a
self-esteem
child.
and everything.
And being bad,
Yeah.
this child just unruly,
Mhm.
and they're not realizing that there is, even if when I explain it to some people, I
Yes.
understand. Some teachers need to understand that it's not something that they can help
Right.
what is happening with them. Okay. All right, we can move on. All right, so we are doing a break now.
After this.
Okay. All right. So the takeaways here, I think we can all agree that the children with ADHD and other children are learning new skills as they are going through this experience now. They are learning a lot more about life skills too, which I think is more than they would do in school.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
they're
Definitely.
having to be a lot more organized. They're taking on things for themselves a lot more than the group kind of situation. The onus is on you at home doing what you're doing. So I think it's teaching them a lot more about life skills and how to navigate difficult situations. Um, and of course, a good thing too is that, as we know, they respond favorably to multiple stimuli, a lot of things that are coming at them. The problem with that is that they don't screen out well enough what they should be attending to and what they shouldn't. But if the modalities that are used with them are different types of modalities, I think it will do so much for their learning, and they get this much easier, I think, online than maybe even in the classroom. And just saying the executive function skills that are important there, as I mentioned, life skills, planning, organizing, making decisions, self-regulation. Those are some of the things that I think they are learning as they are going through this experience at home. And of course, I think another thing, as I said before, is that parents are understanding their children's presentation much better.
Of course, and personal.
Yes. So I think the collaboration between teachers and the parents is very important. And I'm thinking that you would be pushing for that to happen a lot more. And I also think that this is also the time when parents are at home with the children for them to even build a better relationship with their child. They can understand better what's going on with the child, why the child is like this. They can see it unfolding, and so they can begin to relate better with their child, and for them to know that no matter how you are presenting, I love you anyway, and this is me and you working together to make things happen.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
So
we have another poll that we're going to do now, and we'll ask everyone to respond to this question. Here. So, do you have a better understanding of how the child with ADHD presents in the online learning environment? All right, Dr. Watson Campbell. Have a lot of persons saying yes here.
Wonderful.
Few still not sure. Let's see how the poll ends. Because of course there is so much more that we could have covered in this presentation, but time. Yes.
But remember that we also said that we are going to have follow-up. If you saw at the beginning, we said part one.
That's right.
So we are planning to have other other webinars around this subject and others as well.
Okay. Because I think, and I'm going to end the poll now. I'll make a comment after this, and I'll just share the results with you. So about 81% of you, persons who responded, said that yes, you do have a better understanding of what is happening with these children with ADHD in the online learning environment. And, 17%, 11 of you said you're still not very sure. And I think that is something that even with the second half of this presentation, we're hoping that you will have an even better understanding as well, because as you said, Dr. Watson Campbell, in the beginning, a lot of our children with ADHD also present with comorbidities. So learning disorders. So in the education field, we talk about UDL, Universal Design for Learning. And that is something that comes out with these children in the school environment. Are we structuring the school environment to be able to speak to all the different presentations of children that we have within the classroom? So we're not just talking about just the children with ADHD, just the children with dyslexia, just the children with intellectual disabilities or other learning disorders, but we're talking about how are we actually engaging all of the children within the classroom setting. He wanted to speak to this.
And just to let you know too that I have just published a book called Sealing the Cracks, and it has other information in there about the child with ADHD. It is being published, or it has been published by Urban Books and Publishers. and it's about managing behavioral problems in the classroom. But
Yes.
it is something that parents can also benefit
Yes,
from. So
definitely have a better understanding.
Mhm.
All right, so as we go forward, time, I can't believe that it's already, it's already 12:36.
So let's go.
If we can all believe this. We will definitely be addressing the questions at the end, so I will be trying to go through as quickly as I can. Because again, as you can see, these are topics that we're both very passionate about. So I will try to go as quickly as I can and make sure that, you know, there is a level of understanding. So as I said a while ago, many children with ADHD also have that dual diagnosis, right, of dyslexia and other learning disorders. Almost 50% of children with ADHD, the CDC found last year, 2019, also have a learning disorder. And most of the children with learning disorders are typically diagnosed with dyslexia. And I'll go in a little later to explain what dyslexia really is. Now, these children may present with similar needs, as I said a while ago, to the children with ADHD. These are the children with dyslexia, and so they will benefit also from similar strategies. So it's important for us to understand if these children have a diagnosis, what it is, and how they present so that we can cater very well to the needs that they have, the specific needs that they have. So before, oh boy, I am sorry. I am gone ahead of myself. And before I go on, I want to do a pause briefly here again to do one other poll. So I want to hear from you before we even go into what dyslexia is. What really comes to mind when you hear the term dyslexia? So we have a couple of options there, and you can actually choose one, two, or even all. Letter reversals, poor memory, slow reading. So as I said, you can actually choose multiple options. And let's see what everyone comes up with. Do you think of slow reading? Do you think of difficulty reading the clock? Do you think of poor handwriting? What are some of the things that come to mind when you hear the term? And of course, there could be many other things, but kind of just chose a few of these. I'll give persons a couple more seconds to respond. Most persons have responded now. All right. Okay, so we're going to end the poll now. And let's see. So, which is what I expected, that most persons, when they think of dyslexia, letter reversals, right? And so when we get referrals, and certainly when I get referrals to do psychoeducational assessments, many times that is the question. The referral is, child is doing a lot of reversals of letters and numbers or writing words backwards and so on. They have dyslexia, right? And of course, naturally, slow reading. It's interesting, though, that the least amount of persons, and I'll share the results so everyone can see, the least amount of persons chose difficulty reading the clock. And I'll just tell you now quickly that you're all right. All of these are features of children with dyslexia. And I think for some persons, they may actually be surprised by difficulty reading the clock, but we'll get into that a little bit later. All right, so moving on. So of course, as this word cloud shows, all of these things are incorporated in dyslexia, and you'll notice there ADD and ADHD is actually a part of the cloud. But high intelligence, learning disability, letters, creative, spelling, language processing. And so all of these things come to mind when we think of the word dyslexia. Now, this is something that I thought I really wanted to be able to share, because there are a lot of myths that kind of surround, you know, what dyslexia is and what it involves and all of that. So, of course, we know that children with dyslexia, there's a myth that, you know, it's a visual problem, that students with dyslexia see and write letters and words backwards. But in fact, in truth and fact, most children or many children reverse their letters. It's actually a developmental process.
Yeah.
Up to about 6 or 7, it's something that you see naturally in children with dyslexia. So reversing letters or numbers as well is not the only sign or a true sign to look for with children with dyslexia. It could actually be something else going on, as well as it could just be a developmental stage. Another myth that children with dyslexia cannot learn to read, definitely not true. They may have these difficulties, of course, going up, but the reality is that even though they struggle, they can learn to read over time. It's because of how their brain is processing the information. So they struggle with what we call code of language, and understanding what language means and how to manipulate it. But they can definitely learn to read, and they will. Another myth: only boys are affected by dyslexia. Again, that is a myth. Both girls and boys are affected, but similar to ADHD,
more boys.
a lot of boys tend to be picked up quicker because a lot of boys tend to have more behavioral presentation. So they tend to be more hyperactive and impulsive, and they kind of get into trouble, disruptive behaviors, and so on. The girls, on the other hand, tend to a lot of times be more quiet. They don't want you to know they can't read, or they're having difficulty, so they shy away. So you don't even know that they're having a problem. And also another myth, that it's a short-term problem. It is something that we encourage parents when we do assessments, that the child will improve with intervention, but it is a lifelong diagnosis. In that, again, it is also a neurodevelopmental disorder similar to ADHD again. And so it does have to do with the brain. It has to do with how the brain is functioning, the processes, and so on. And so it is something that will carry through the child's life, but it can improve with intervention. That is a critical thing. So what is dyslexia? It is a language-based disability. And so even in the DSM-5, which is what we use, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, this is what it is categorized as. So it's not just reading, which is why you will see that children with dyslexia have challenges with spelling as well. They have challenges with writing, even their speech and articulation of words. And when we go to a couple of slides down, you'll see why. Speech, even learning spoken language and expressing themselves and so on, they may struggle with that. Retrieving words from their what we call lexicon, their vocabulary tends to, they have challenges with those things, because it is a language-based disability. It's not just reading, right? There's a lot more that encompasses it. So what I wanted to show here on this slide, and you will see, is that dyslexia impacts several different areas. And so when we spoke a while ago about the clock, and I'll just quickly bring everything up because it's quite a bit of things, you will see that there are quite a few things that children struggle with. So we have the memory difficulties. So a lot of times, especially for the younger children, they struggle to learn things like days of the week, months of the year, their address, things like that. They struggle with that at an early age. Their timetables as they get older, because it's that whole thing of what we call working memory, right? Those executive function skills, those higher level processes, they struggle with these things as well. Then their motor control. So again, that is another part of the brain that is impacted, where they have a challenge with handwriting, completing written tasks. When they're reading now as well, they lose place on the in text. So what we're tracking, something that Dr. Watson Campbell will speak a lot to when she, from an OT perspective, moving or overlapping text. So you see all of these videos and so on that show persons with dyslexia when they're reading, it's like the words and everything is moving on the page. It's not definitively what is happening, but for the child, it seems to be that way, because they lose their place on the page so much. Needing to reread Yes, needing to reread things a lot. It's spelling, they can't remember what words look like. So again, that comes back to the whole what we call visual processing, that orthographic processing of when you're learning to read, you remember letters, there's it's symbols. Do you remember that when you see BAT, every time you see those symbols that it says bat, right? So they have a challenge with that. Difficulty hearing sounds, as I said before, so they confuse sounds. And again, it's that whole what we call auditory processing challenges now that a lot of children with dyslexia have, which is why they struggle with the connecting the letters and symbols, the sounds, symbols and the sound. They can't find the right word, as I said earlier. The issues with organization, putting things on paper and so on is a real challenge for them. They may have it all up here, but they can't get it down on the paper. And here we go. Difficulties with telling the time. And part of the challenge is because they have those visual, perceptual issues, spatial issues. Yes. So it's a hard thing for them to remember what is before, what is after, what each one means, and that kind of thing. So they struggle, left, right, confusion, right? So again, all of these things we're seeing that, it is something that it is a complex diagnosis that all has its root from a neurological perspective, right? So again, I really love to show the brain. And just to quickly point out for you, the main things that, we want to highlight. So for these children, these are the main areas in the brain: the Broca's area, parietal temporal area, that helps in terms of, remembering what words are in the occipital temporal area. When they see the word, can they remember what that model of that word is, right? And then the articulation area as well, in terms of actually putting the sounds together. What they found in brain imaging is that children who have dyslexia struggle with articulation of sounds and putting those sounds together and remembering what words look like. And so you notice that they say this area, the Broca's area, actually gets much bigger because it's a way of compensating, which is why the children are so slow and laborious when they're reading, because they're trying to pronounce every single letter and it's just not, the process is not working as it should, right? So it's a very inefficient process that they use because these other two areas that should be working are not activated. All right. So what does this mean for our children online? So again, some of the challenges that they have because of the visual spatial issues, the computer screen is a much smaller screen compared to if they're in the classroom setting and they have a whiteboard or something to work with, right? So those spatial issues come out. They may have issues with not being able to have the teacher there giving the correction, picking up on the errors as they're reading or as they're writing and giving that immediate corrective feedback, right? The self-confidence, as we said before, with the children with ADHD, they struggle and they know how hard it is with working independently. So all of this ends up becoming a major challenge for them, especially if they have to complete written tasks under timed conditions, right? So we know that these children will need the accommodations, even in the online setting, to be able to do what they need to do. They may not be clearly processing what they're hearing. So the internet, all the glitching and feedback, they already, a lot of children with dyslexia have auditory processing issues and they're very sensitive. They can't filter what they should. So again, similar to the child with ADHD, what should I attend to? What should I not attend to? They have a hard time filtering. So that is a challenge for them in terms of keeping up and processing all the different instructions and so on. And they may go into what we call almost circuit overload, right? Because if there is a lot of reading, the level is too high for them, the volume of reading that is required, they are going to struggle, all right? And again, as you mentioned with the children with ADHD, the lack of group interaction, a lot of times these children, how they function and how they compensate, They learn from their
Okay,
peers.
that's right.
They
Yes.
pick up on cues.
Yes.
And if they don't have those things around them, they struggle significantly
That's right.
because they rely heavily on it. And just the overall lack of social interaction and emotional support that we have to pay attention to. However, like everything in life, there are also a good side, right? So students can work at their own pace, hopefully. So in the asynchronous learning environment like the Google Classroom, where they can go on, watch a video 10 million times. If the teacher gives notes, they can take their time and go through it, that kind of thing. But they also, like the child with ADHD, tend to be very creative. And so the project-based side of it and type of assignments that should be given for the children, becomes, so they can become an active participant in their learning process. The technology as well can help with their organization. So, especially for like Google Classroom and so on, a lot of the platforms have built-in reminders and calendars and that kind of thing to help to keep them, on task and going. And learning in the home environment, maybe less stigmatizing, they're not having to hide and read and that kind of thing. So it may actually work in their benefit to increase their confidence. And a lot of tasks may not be handwritten. And so that may also help with things like the spell check, and just how hard it is. Their fine motor skills are not put under as much pressure. All right. So there are some advantages for them, for sure. So I want to go through a few helpful tips, before we go through. But I believe at this point, I have another quick poll that I want to do with you. I know we're running out of time, but there are two quick questions. So do you think that children benefit from online learning tools? And also, do you think that, you are equipped to use these tools that are available in a way that will benefit children, specifically children with dyslexia? All right. So I'll just give a few more seconds here to see.
Yes, it's
interesting. Yes. So now the part of feeling equipped, I see most persons, it's very balanced in terms of who is saying yes, no, and not sure. All right, so I'm gonna end the poll here and I will share the results with you. So we're seeing that majority of persons, 85% of you, think that children can benefit from the online learning tools that we have at our disposal. And most of you actually think, 37 of you, not so sure that you are fully equipped. You don't think that you're fully equipped to use these tools. 29% of you said yes, you think you are, and 34 of you say you're not sure. So, we're hoping that by the time we are able to come out of this, we will have our teachers be more equipped to work with our children online.
You mean the whole COVID experience?
Yes. Okay. Yes, because the reality is
a continuous learning environment.
And the reality is that even after the COVID experience and we are able to go back in face to face, I would hope definitely that a lot of what we've learned from this experience will continue because it is beneficial for the children. Right. So just a couple of friendly tips. Allowing for alternative options for showing their knowledge. So a lot of our children, as we said, with dyslexia, have challenges with writing. So can they do a video? Can they do an audio recording? Can you do a verbal, oral test with them and so on? Multiple choice versus essays. I mean, there's a place for those things, but are we able to diversify what we expect of them? Accountability partners, you mentioned that earlier. Again, with the children with ADHD, having them pair up with their peers to see how they can have persons, just keep them on task and keep them going.
They can still have a buddy.
Yes. Online. Yes. That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
They can call each other.
Yes.
And talk about
yes. Overloading with heavy reading assignments, again, is a major challenge for these children. So how can we put things in place to, bring out the thinking skills and, the creativity instead of just pages and pages of just content, right? Because they can learn that very same content without it being in that format. Using visuals to your advantage. So when you're in the classroom, not just talking, but screen sharing, using videos, audios, just as we said for the children with ADHD, right? Encouraging the students to look again, right? Letting them know that it's okay to reread and rewatch and so on. And again, as we said, using more inquiry-based kind of activities, all right? Reflection tasks. The classroom has something where you can actually do discussion boards. You have the Jamboard that you can use, which is like sticky notes that the children can send questions and post different things.
Right.
So it's a way to get them to think and express themselves in a safe way. And encouraging a positive mindset. So helping them to see that, they're not alone and that you are there. Praise, giving feedback as much as possible, and just giving that guidance, understanding that, again, the students have a real challenge and you are there to support. So I have this here, as I wrap up, to just say, use technology to your advantage. There is so much that we can do. Kahoot and quizzes are there. You can go, after this, go and explore some of these different apps on your own. Kahoot and quizzes can be used to do like in-class quizzes with the children that are interactive. So you set up your thing, they ask a question, it's exciting because they choose and they can see and they get to see who is on top in the class and that kind of thing. So it's good. YouTube and PowerPoint, we all know, putting your presentations visual instead of just reading or using the textbook. Edpuzzle is awesome. I love it. I learned it a few years ago. You can actually use it in tandem with YouTube, where you can download and save your YouTube videos and then edit them. So you make the videos more interactive. So you can put questions in there. You can edit the video. So you may find a video that is 15 minutes long, but it's 3 minutes of the video that you want. You can use Edpuzzle to do that. So again, Nearpod is similar to PowerPoint, but it's more interactive. And of course, the good old WhatsApp, right? But there is a lot in terms of technology that we can utilize to help us to really be able to maximize on these children's potential. So just to wrap up, it's all about the students, right? Building those relationships with the students, but also with their parents and guardians is critical. Putting in time for those one-on-one consultations and trying to see how you can individualize teaching for these children. On Zoom, you can use your breakout rooms, you can do WhatsApp calls, whatever it is. But trying to understand, put yourself in their shoes and having empathy, right? Important. To know that you understand that they have genuine challenges, and being flexible. So we know that it's not ordinary times, and knowing that we can't, expect that things are going to go one way and perfectly all the time, but being open-minded to all the possibilities that are there. So with that, I close. I'm sorry we didn't have more time, but as we said, we will have follow-up sessions. So
you were answering some of the questions as we went along.
I would hope I was. We can take a look now to see.
Can you post the book
yes,
title
so there is
chat?
the book title. So I will just respond to that one right now. As we see that, I think I responded to most or all of the other questions within the chat at this point. I think there was one question in the Q&A section. At this time, remember that you can post questions if you have them in the Q&A section of the webinar, and we will do our best to respond. And it is published by Urban
Books and Publishers.
Where can it be found, Dr. Hudson Campbell?
I think there is one bookshop they have in Premier Plaza. That's one of the ones I know. Yeah.
Okay. Any pharmacies or?
I'm not sure, but Urban Books and Publishers have a number, so you could probably call there.
Yes, to find out where it is available. All right, so we have a couple of, we have more or less one question here. How effective are the provisions in place to instruct students with disabilities during this COVID-19 pandemic? Ooh, riveting question.
Yeah.
You want to start and I can...
Well, I think that from what I've seen, because McCam also has an early childhood school program,
Yes.
and from what we have seen, the children have done fairly well, because even as we are talking about going back, coming face to face,
Yeah.
some parents are saying, can we stay home because it's working very well
Yes.
with their children.
Yes.
So for some children, it does not work very
No.
readily at all, because the ones who need a lot of monitoring
Yes.
and explanation for things,
Yes.
maybe. So I don't know what you want.
Yes. I mean, in terms of the effectiveness, I should say, the provisions unfortunately vary from school to school.
Yeah.
Right.
And
so that also is something that makes this question a little bit challenging to answer. What I can say is that, to add to what you said a while ago, is that the provisions in terms of the online learning experience and so on is not necessarily as effective for some children as it could be.
Yeah.
Part of the challenge is that, a lot of times our parents don't necessarily have the skill sets to be able to know how to deal with the challenges that their children have.
That's
right? And they also have to work and they have their own stresses and so on going on. So this kind of flows into, the next question here that we have: what can the parent do to help a child with dyslexia? Interestingly, up to yesterday, I spoke with a parent doing a feedback for an assessment, and I was telling him about Microsoft Word Online, that it has a feature in it called Immersive Reader.
Okay.
And it's not the regular Microsoft Word. You would have to maybe copy and paste whatever the document is into the Microsoft Word Online document, and then it has the immersive reader option at the top. Something you can explore on your own when you have the time, because what it does is it does all sorts of things. You can have sections where the words will show pictures, so it's like a board maker built in. You can actually highlight just one line at a time for the child. So for the children with the tracking issues, you can put it in different colors. So you can have it highlighted in yellow or blue or purple. Yes. So these are some things that you can do. But of course, for the child with dyslexia at home, just as with the child with ADHD, they need a lot of monitoring as well. They need a lot of support at home. You may have to read for them a lot more. You may have to write for them a lot more. So offering some of the supports that they probably maybe would have gotten at school, you will have to do that as the parent. Audiobooks. An excellent website that you can probably check out is Get Epic, and I will put it in the chat right now. Getepic.com, because what it does, remember that we have the chat is also functional, so we are typing some of these things in the chat as well as the Q&A section, so you can check out the chat as well for some of these responses. But that is also good for helping with things like audiobooks. So as parents, I would say try to use audiobooks as much as you can, so that the child is not labeled with just having to read on their own. Right. Any number we can call to check if the child has dyslexia? Certainly. So of course, here at McCam Center, we do psychoeducational assessments. We are located in the Hopelands area behind UTEC. Our numbers are 977-6496 or
9770189.
Yes. So I will respond to your question here. Elham Gordon, I'll respond to your question in the Q&A so that everyone can also see that.
And I think there are other agencies like there's a dyslexia association that we just heard about.
Yes.
And then there is the learning center. And then there's the microcare center. So there are other places as well that you could, check into. But certainly you can call us here at McCam Center.
For sure. Yes. Not
Right, we're
seeing any
finishing
more
up now.
questions right now. Yes.
We've gone over our
Yes.
just
But
about.
we thank you so much because everyone seems to still be here.
Yes, yes, yes.
Everyone seems to still
Part
be
2
here.
is coming up.
Yes. Persons have raised their hands, but we're gonna ask for you to probably just quickly type your questions in the Q&A or in the chat so that we can respond to you.
We can give you 2 more minutes.
Yes. And someone also said early stimulation program. Most definitely. Well, early stim would not necessarily diagnose dyslexia, right? No. Because they are more looking at the very young children and looking at any developmental issues that they have. Yes.
Dyslexia is usually age 7 and upwards that you are, but you can see that
you can definitely see the signs from as early as preschool. Because as we said, you know, some of these children, they struggle with learning their letters, learning even the days of the week, months of the year, those kind of things. But usually
say you're doing a psych ed assessment until a child is kind of like
you can do the psych ed, but you don't necessarily give a diagnosis full-fledged until about 6 months. ADHD is a little different.
Oh yes, for sure.
Because you can diagnose ADHD from about
4,
right? 4, yes, ideally, ideally, right? But usually when I do assessments with children who are below 6, I will give indications. So I may speak to their visual processing issues. I may speak to their auditory processing issues.
And a lot of times
memory.
And you send your children onto OT for me to do further assessments if you suspect some of these things are going on.
So that therapy and intervention can then start. But then you recommend further assessment within a year to 2 years to see what is happening.
That's
yes. Okay, the various skill challenges that children with dyslexia have. Okay, so someone is asking me to go back to that slide. So certainly I can do that for you. I think this is the one that you are asking. Yes, the one that shows pretty much most, a lot of the challenges that children display. Yes.
And I would say that for the child with ADHD too. You will see the mapping of the brain shows that there are many different areas. I think there are about 4 or 5 areas that are definitely
impacted. Yes.
So it's not just one area.
Yes. So we know for sure the frontal lobe.
For sure. Yes.
The amygdala.
Right.
Yes, so there are a lot of, but especially the frontal lobe, because a lot of those executive function skills that you spoke about, the organization, the time management.
That's the prefrontal area of the brain.
Yes.
Okay, I think we've covered enough.
Yes.
So we need to move on.
Yes.
But just to say thank you again for coming on. You know, we look forward to doing this. We certainly will keep on doing them because we think that this is one of the things we can do to support the community that is out there that, you know, has children with exceptionalities.
Yes.
Because we can do so much to help them if we have the knowledge, we know.
Yes.
Because knowledge will impact on practice every time.
Yes,
or
and
should.
attitude.
And attitude.
We hope.
Yes. Okay, so take care of yourselves, please. Be safe.
Yes.
And until we meet again.
Yes, definitely.
Okay,
we look forward to it. Have a safe and dry day.
Yes. No, it's not going to be dry today.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinars.
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, and please remember to complete the survey at the very end. So once we end the meeting, there will be a survey that will come up, and we please ask, because we look forward to your response so that we can know how to make it better the next time. Yes, thank you. Take care.